us to believe that evidence of a crime exists in the location described and will describe exactly what they're looking for. After the judge looks and then makes a determination that, yes, there is probable cause here, that we do have authorization, FBI agents will conduct the search and they'll go to the facility and gather that evidence. I think it's important to remember two things here, Wolf. The first of which being this notion that these are privileged communications that are off limits. That is not something that the person being searched gets to determine. You know, the old adage, tell it to the judge. That will ultimately be determined by the judge, what is actually relevant and what can be used down the line. You don't get to say, FBI, you can't take this because this is privileged. Also, it's important to know that Mr. Cohen will know exactly what was taken, because in the United States of America, when an FBI search is conducted, the friendly FBI agents searching your residence or your location will actually leave you with a receipt telling you exactly what was taken.
Documents and all sorts of CDs, who knows?
Right, and Wolf, I mean, this can't be a huge surprise to Michael Cohen. Obviously, he's known now for at least some time that there was a suspicious activity report that was generated by the bank flagging this transaction, this payment, as something that was suspicious. Again, this is money laundering laws that are specifically set up to flag suspicious payments. And so this bank flagged this payment. This is months ago in 2016. And so none of this is likely a surprise to Michael Cohen. He knew that somebody was going to take a deeper look at this. It was just a matter of when.
Computers, laptops, all sorts of stuff.
Bank records.
Cell phones. They could take any of that.
It would take, they would like, exactly. They want communications records. They want emails. They want bank records. All of this is it would be a very broad request. But there would be specific things that they're looking for, and one of the things Gloria Borger is told, it relates specifically to this payment to Stormy Daniels in the days before the election.
All right, guys, everybody stand by. We're getting more information. I want to go to the White House. Our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, is working his sources. First of all, any reaction from the White House, from the president to the breaking news?
Not yet, Wolf. A couple of things on that. The president is about to be in a situation where the White House pool will be going in to ask him a couple of questions. Potentially, he's meeting with military leaders this evening, dining with military leaders this evening, and so potentially he could be asked this question about this raid that was conducted at the office of Michael Cohen. The other thing we should point out, Wolf, is we have asked the White House press office for a response to all of this. Keep in mind, in the past, and even the president himself last week said, talk to my attorney, Michael Cohen, about Stormy Daniels. Well, Michael Cohen was obviously the subject of a raid today, so that is not exactly possible. So we're waiting to find out if there's some kind of comment coming out of the White House. In the meantime, Wolf, I can tell you that inside Trump world, they are not happy with this development today. I talked to one source close to the White House earlier today who said, based on his own conversations with the president, close advisors to the president, that this kind of action, this kind of course being taken by the FBI to raid the offices of his personal attorney could push the president in the direction of firing the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to make sure that Robert Mueller is off of this case. That obviously is a potential for something that could take place. We don't know whether or not the president will indeed do that. But in the words of this source close to the White House, Robert Mueller has gone rogue. That was how it was put to me by the source close to the White House, Wolf. So they are obviously very concerned about all of this. And of course, that raises the specter of essentially a constitutional clash between the White House and Capitol Hill. We've long heard from lawmakers in both parties that if the president were to take some kind of action to elbow Robert Mueller out of this investigation, that could potentially lead to impeachment proceedings up on Capitol Hill, or lawmakers taking into their own hands and trying to elect or vote on a piece of legislation that would appoint a special prosecutor, their own special prosecutor in all of this. How all of that would unfold in the days, weeks, months to come, that's just uncharted waters, or waters we haven't been in for a very long time. But Wolf, undoubtedly, and I don't think this should come as any surprise, the fact that the FBI, even though it was through the U.S. Attorney's Office and not directly from the special counsel, the fact that this kind of action was taken is rattling people inside Trump world, people close to the president. And as I said, this one source close to the White House, even though the facts don't really match up with that, because the U.S. Attorney's Office directed this to take place, not exactly the special counsel, but in the words of this one source close to the White House, they believe Robert Mueller has gone rogue in this investigation. It's not about Russia meddling or Russian collusion anymore if they're talking about Stormy Daniels. Wolf.
New York, where the FBI raided Michael Cohen's offices. Our national correspondent Athena Jones is just outside where that all took place. Athena, what happened where you are, and is there any reaction coming in, at least so far, from Stormy Daniels' lawyer?
Hi, Wolf. There is. You're right. We're at one of the locations of one of the raids that took place this morning. The law firm of Squire Patton Boggs, which is on the 23rd floor of Rockefeller Center behind me. We spoke with a security guard who said that floor was inaccessible today. We can imagine why. Cohen had formed a strategic alliance with the law firm to develop business after he left the Trump organization last year. So the firm doesn't represent President Trump. It doesn't represent Michael Cohen. And the firm put out a statement saying that they concluded their agreement with Cohen. This raid doesn't have anything to do with them, but they have been in touch with federal authorities. But as we've been talking about, Gloria Borger says that among the many documents that were and the records that were collected as part of these raids were documents related to this Stormy Daniels case. This is, of course, the case of the porn star that Michael Cohen says he paid $130,000 to just weeks before the election. So that is apparently a part of the reason for this raid. Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' lawyer, is practically gleeful on Twitter. He tweeted out an article, the New York Times article about this raid, and he followed up saying, "See below and review my comments and predictions last week on CNN and MSNBC. An enormous amount of misplaced faith has been placed on Michael Cohen's shoulders, in my opinion. If he does not hold up, this could end very, very badly for Donald J. Trump and others." And then you have the article that he was referring folks to. So this is clearly a very big deal. And remember, this is a case that is still ongoing. It's really just getting underway. Michael Avenatti has now asked twice. He refiled a request with a judge to question Michael Cohen and also President Trump under oath about this $130,000 payment, about the deal itself. So this is really a big deal to see this office be raided like this today in the midst of all of this.
And what's it like over there where you are, Athena? Big crowds are developing. What do you see?
Well, you wouldn't really know that anything had taken place walking by here, including inside. We were told by that security guard that the 23rd floor where this law office was located was inaccessible, but otherwise it looks like a normal day, a normal afternoon, sort of middle of rush hour here in New York. You can't tell that anything happened up there this morning. Well,
Athena, stand by. Jeffrey Toobin is with us. Jeffrey, you're a former federal prosecutor. Give us your analysis of this extraordinary moment.
Well, I think it's important to emphasize how unusual it is to get a search warrant of a lawyer's office. The Justice Department does do it on occasion, but they're very reluctant to give prosecutors permission to ask for search warrants of lawyers' offices because there are so many complicated issues relating to the attorney-client privilege and obtaining documents that might violate that privilege. So they only allow these searches in rare circumstances. So this makes this moment actually even more extraordinary. It's not just that someone so close to the president had his offices searched, but someone who's a lawyer, which means that the Justice Department felt very strongly that there was probable cause related the evidence of crimes in Michael Cohen's office, and a magistrate judge agreed. Now, the answer to what they are looking for is in a document called the affidavit in support of the search warrant, but that's under seal. This is a breaking investigation. So unfortunately, we're left to speculate, I hope intelligently, about what they were actually looking for.
Gloria, you're working your sources too. You're getting some more information.
Yes, and I think it's more of what we were saying before, that I've just been told from a source who is close to this case that this is overwhelmingly about Stormy Daniels, that there may have been some tertiary requests that amount to his business dealings, et cetera, in New York. But I think it's about the payments. I think it's including the payments to Stormy, but this source said largely about the payments to Stormy, and I do believe that it also covers communications that he may have had with the president.
That's a pretty sensitive issue. How do you see it, Laura?
Well, there's a couple issues. Number one, obviously, attorney-client privilege communications are sacrosanct, But there's a crime fraud exception, which says that if it's something that's being used or in furtherance of a crime, that privilege could possibly go away. Don't know if that's the case here, but certainly his comments about going rogue and not knowing, not including the President of the United States, his client, in decision regarding a campaign contribution, perhaps, or a donation, would be a problem. But the larger issue I think about, Wolf, is that, remember, just 10 months ago, or a little over 10 months ago, the sitting SDNY U.S. attorney was fired by Donald Trump. And last October, Jeff Sessions sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee and said that the President of the United States had a hand in selecting or interviewing the successors. Now, this person, Jeffrey, I believe Berman is his name, is somebody who was formerly with the Iran-Contra, worked under the independent counsel, and his same office is the one, not only that includes, of course, Trump Tower, where that infamous Don Jr. meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya took place, but it also includes the Manafort investigation. So looking at it overwhelmingly about the role that special counsel may have had in this or in that particular office, it almost seems as though a real bite in the proverbial for the President of the United States, who would have been involved in the selection of this person. But still, we have to get over the hurdle of the privileged communication, but there is quite an exception for it.
You know, Ann Milgram, you're a former federal prosecutor as well. The Wall Street Journal is now reporting that his home was raided by the FBI as well. He also had a room at the Lowe's Regency Hotel that was raided. We know the office he had at this law firm was raided in New York. A dozen FBI, we're told, CNN has learned a dozen FBI agents were involved in these respective raids. What does that all say to you?
It says that they had reason to believe that there was evidence in all of those places. I mean, remember, to get an affidavit signed by a federal judge to execute a search warrant, the assistant U.S. attorney has to basically be able to say to the judge, we have probable cause to believe that a crime was committed by this individual, and we believe that evidence will be in each of these specific locations. So it must be that Mr. Cohen has significant ties to all those offices, had computers potentially or documents stored, and there's reason to believe that there would be evidence in every single one of those places.
Josh Campbell, how do you see it? Multiple raids, various locations, FBI agents all over the place. Clearly, they had search warrants.
Well, it shows you the breadth of the investigation. It also shows you that they're trying to do these searches simultaneous, which would make sense. In an investigation, if you have a target who has potentially evidence in different locations, you would want to hit all those targets at the same time or in very short order, because you don't want a defendant or someone that may know him destroying evidence. So that's going to take place. You know, in an FBI search, it is on the FBI side. Time is on the FBI side, so they're going to take as many agents as they think necessary in order to secure a location, in order to gather the evidence and the information that they're looking for. Let me just say that, you know, the notion that we've heard a little bit earlier that because Mr. Cohen is cooperating, that all of this is unnecessary, I think should be addressed. I mean, those are my former colleagues there who were former prosecutors and attorneys know that in law enforcement, we don't look at the world and say, you know, I trust this person because he's given me reason to trust him. We look at individuals, especially defendants, and say, do I have reason to distrust this person? And with this particular individual, when you look at the $130,000 payment and a lot of other things that we've seen reported, an investigator is going to look at him and say, you know, this isn't someone who is necessarily going to cooperate and hand us over exactly what we're going to want. So we're going to go to a judge, an independent magistrate, and get the government to demand that those records be turned over, and they do that via the search.
You know, Jeffrey Toobin, I can only imagine how angry the president is when he sees all of this unfolding. We had been told earlier he was watching cable TV, watching all the breaking news. Is this the red line that potentially could result in his decision to fire Rod Rosenstein, the acting, the deputy attorney general, or Robert Mueller for that matter?
I can only think of one thing that Robert Mueller could have done that would have enraged the president more, and that would have been to search the home of Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Michael Cohen is that close to the president, and when you think that a search warrant is a license to rummage in the private papers and emails and electronic records and cell phone records of the person who described himself and whose lawyer described himself as the president's fixer. Think how vulnerable that must make the president feel. Think how enraged that must make him feel. This has to be a moment where, if he's considering firing Mueller, this will be something that prompts it.
You know, and we also know that the president invited Michael Cohen to Mar-a-Lago a week ago. They publicly had dinner. The president said publicly, he is my attorney. And if this is indeed largely related to the Stormy Daniels payoffs. That the bank, as Evan Perez was saying earlier, we know that it was flagged. We know that this kind of movement of money is very much flagged by banks. So you have to ask yourself a question. Why are they looking at this so closely? Were there more? Were there other businesses Michael Cohen had that had some issues, perhaps tax issues? How much of this is related to Trump? We believe that the warrant included some communications with the president. We don't know what that is. We know the president doesn't do email, for example. But I agree with Jeffrey. I think the president's got to be pretty upset about it.
The president of the United States is now commenting on these late-breaking developments. Let's go to Jim Acosta over at the White House. What's he saying, Jim?
Wolf, we can tell you that the White House press pool is in with the president right now. They may be coming out at this very moment. The president meeting with some military leaders here this evening. And we can tell you that in just the last several minutes, he commented on all of this. He was asked about the Michael Cohen raid, and the president saying, quote, "It's a disgraceful situation. It's an attack on our country," the president said, "what we all stand for." He said, going on here, "I have this witch hunt that is constantly going on." He referred to the special counsel, and we should caution, these are the initial quotes coming out of this pool spray. We're going to have to wait for the exact verbatim, but this is what we're getting so far. But referring to the special counsel, the president said just moments ago, according to this initial readout from the White House pool, that the special counsel is the most conflicted group of people I have ever seen. The president went on to criticize the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, for recusing himself in the Russia investigation. As you know, that is something that really gets under the president's skin. He repeatedly said that no one is looking at the other side, referring to Hillary Clinton's emails. Wolf, this is obviously more to come on all of this. We're going to be hearing in just a few moments when this tape comes out. This is what we call a tape turn. As soon as that tape is ready, Wolf, that video is going to come out, and you're going to hear the President of the United States responding very emotionally, responding very viscerally to what is undoubtedly some very negative news in this investigation. You can see the reporters, they're coming out of the president, this meeting with the president that was just happening a few moments ago. So you'll be seeing that video shortly. But undoubtedly, Wolf, this is a president who is deeply upset by these developments today, that the FBI would raid the offices and hotel room and so on of his personal attorney. When the President of the United States is referring to something like this happening so last minute as a disgrace, that is obviously going to make a lot of news. The other thing we should point out, in one of the other pool notes to come out of the room here with one of the other reporters who was in the room, the President also appeared to say that he learned about all of this as we did. And so it sounds as if this all came very much as a surprise to people over here at the White House. Again, this video should be playing out shortly, and we're going to get a better read exactly what the president said. As you can see, these reporters filing into the press room right now, Wolf.
And we've just learned, Jim, that some of the communications that were seized by the FBI agents in the course of these raids in New York today involving Michael Cohen included some of Michael Cohen's communications with the president himself. This will further anger the president. And as you point out, the president just now calling all of this a disgraceful situation, a witch hunt. He says, as you point out, it's an attack on our own country, what we stand for.
That's right, Wolf. And the president knows history all too well. He knows what happened during the Whitewater investigation of the late 90s, the impeachment of Bill Clinton, how that started off as an investigation into real estate property transactions involving the Clintons, and ended up becoming a sex scandal for President Bill Clinton. And obviously, the president is mindful of what took place today, if the reports are accurate. That communications pertaining to the Stormy Daniels case were seized by the FBI. The president may be feeling like this is deja vu all over again. And again, referring to what the source close to the White House told me earlier this evening, Wolf, if the feeling is inside the inner circle of the president's advisors, people who work here in the White House, people who talk to him on a daily basis, if those people are telling the president, Mr. President, the time is now, Robert Mueller has stepped outside the bounds of this investigation. Yes, they can say they handed over to the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, and yes, they can say that Robert Mueller himself did not go into the offices of Michael Cohen in his hotel room and so on, that they obviously, and you can hear this in the president's voice and in these words in a few moments when we play this out, He obviously feels that this is an attack on his presidency, an attack on himself, and this is very ominous what you're hearing from the president right now when he's describing it in this kind of language, that this is an attack. He feels that he is under attack right now, Wolf.
And the context, the president's meeting with his military leaders to discuss a possible U.S. reaction to what has happened in Syria, a poison gas attack on children and others suspected by the Syrian regime. And the president at the top, and we're going to get this tape momentarily, right at the top, blasts what happened today in New York involving his attorney and longtime fixer, Michael Cohen, calling it a disgraceful situation. We're going to get that tape momentarily. Our viewers will hear it. Let me go to Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey, sounds to me like this is a potential turning point right now. You can see how angry the president is. He says it's an attack on our own country, what we all stand for.
Well, you know, we heard that shortly after Robert Mueller was appointed, that the president wanted to fire him, and Don McGahn, the White House counsel, threatened to quit if, in fact, the president fired Robert Mueller, and the president backed off. Certainly, this initial response from the president suggests that the firing of Robert Mueller is right again on the table. And the question is, will Don McGahn talk him out of it? Will General Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff, talk him out of it? Or will he simply go ahead and do it? Because, I mean, if you listen to those comments, and we've only, we haven't heard them firsthand, but we've heard them from Jim, it sounds like a man who wants to fire Robert Mueller. I mean, I don't know what other interpretation you could make. And if that happens, we're talking about a constitutional crisis. We're talking about impeachment hitting Congress. Even with a Republican Congress, there will be Republicans who want to impeach him, to say nothing of virtually every Democrat.
Yeah, it sounds, you know, Laura, like a president. We're only a minute or so away from hearing the president's comments. It sounds like a president not only would like to fire Robert Mueller, but Rod Rosenstein, maybe Jeff Sessions as well, the Attorney General, for recusing himself from this whole Russia probe.
Well, the domino effect is now at full force. He, of course, is looking at Jeff Sessions as the impetus behind all of these different actions, and, of course, Comey as well. But remember, he can't simply just fire Mueller without having any recourse with Congress. There has to be a due cause or a reason to do so. But remember, Mueller has given himself, oddly enough, some political cover here, Wolf. He has referred it to the Southern District of New York, not himself, trying to avoid the very ire of the President of the United States by saying, it's not under my purview, in my wheelhouse at this time. I'm handing over to somebody else who has prosecutorial prerogative in this jurisdiction. And that was somebody that he himself chose after firing and cleaning house of the 96 U.S. attorneys, including Preet Bharara. So the president has, in a way, unlike he's accepting, invited a lot of this happening. But there's much more of a disconnect between what Robert Mueller has done as a part of the so-called witch hunt and what the SDNY is doing right now.
All right, the president speaking moments ago at an event, at a meeting with his national security team, his military leaders, talking about a possible U.S. response to what's been going on in Syria. Here's the president.
So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. I've been saying it for a long time. I've wanted to keep it down. We've given, I believe, over 1 million pages worth of documents to the special counsel. They continue to just go forward, and here we are talking about Syria. We're talking about a lot of serious things with the greatest fighting force ever. And I have this witch hunt constantly going on for over 12 months now. And actually much more than that. You could say it was right after I won the nomination it started. And it's a disgrace. It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for. So when I saw this and when I heard it like you did. I said, that is really now in a whole new level of unfairness. So this has been going on. I saw one of the reporters who is not necessarily a fan of mine, not necessarily very good to me. He said, in effect, that this is ridiculous. This is now getting ridiculous. They found no collusion whatsoever with Russia. The reason they found it is there was no collusion at all. No collusion. This is the most biased group of people. These people have the biggest conflicts of interest I've ever seen. Democrats, all, or just about all, either Democrats or a couple of Republicans that worked for President Obama. They're not looking at the other side. They're not looking at the Hillary Clinton horrible things that she did and all of the crimes that were committed. They're not looking at all of the things that happened that everybody is very angry about, I can tell you, from the Republican, even the independent side. They only keep looking at us. So they find no collusion, and then they go from there and they say, well, let's keep going. And they raid an office of a personal attorney early in the morning. And I think it's a disgrace. So we'll be talking about it more. But this is the most conflicted group of people I've ever seen. The Attorney General made a terrible mistake when he did this and when he recused himself, or he should have certainly let us know if he was going to recuse himself, and we would have put a different Attorney General in. So he made what I consider to be a very terrible mistake for the country. But you'll figure that out. All I can say is, after looking for a long period of time, not even before the special counsel, because it really started just about from the time I won the nomination. And you look at what took place and what happened, and it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. I've been president now for what seems like a lengthy period of time. We've done a fantastic job. We've beaten ISIS. We have just about 100% of the caliphate or the land. Our economy is incredible. The stock market dropped a lot today as soon as they heard the noise of, this nonsense that's going on. It dropped a lot. It was up, way up, and then it dropped quite a bit at the end, a lot. But that we have to go through that. We've had that hanging over us now from the very, very beginning. And yet the other side, they don't even bother looking. And the other side is where there are crimes. And those crimes are obvious. Lies under oath all over the place. Emails that are knocked out, that are acid washed and deleted. Nobody's ever seen. 33,000 emails are deleted after getting a subpoena for Congress. And nobody bothers looking at that. And many, many other things. So I just think it's a disgrace that a thing like this can happen. With all of that being said, we are here to discuss Syria tonight. We're the greatest fighting force anywhere in the world. These gentlemen and ladies are incredible people, incredible talent. And we're making a decision as to what we do with respect to the horrible attack that was made near Damascus. And it will be met, and it will be met forcefully. And when, I will not say, because I don't like talking about timing. But we are developing the greatest force that we've ever had. We had $700 billion just approved, which was the reason I went along with that budget, because we had to fix our military. General Mattis would tell you that above anybody. We had to fix our military. And right now we're in a big process of doing that. $700 billion and then $716 billion next year. So we're going to make a decision tonight or very shortly thereafter. And you'll be hearing the decision. But we can't let atrocities like we all witnessed, and you can see that, and it's horrible. We can't let that happen. In our world, we can't let that happen. Especially when we're able to, because of the power of the United States, because of the power of our country, we're able to stop it. I want to thank Ambassador John Bolton for joining us. I think he's going to be a fantastic representative of our team. He's highly respected by everybody in this room. And John, I want to thank you very much. This is going to be a lot of work. Interesting day. He picked today as his first day. So, generals, I think he picked the right day. but certainly you're going to find it very exciting. But you are going to do a fantastic job, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. No. No, I'm not. Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens. But I think it's really a sad situation when you look at what happened. And many people have said you should fire him. Again, they found nothing. And in finding nothing, that's a big statement. If you know the person who's in charge of the investigation, you know all about that, Deputy Rosenstein, Rod Rosenstein. He wrote the letter very critical of Comey. One of the things I said, I fired Comey. Well, I turned out to do the right thing, because you look at all of the things that he's done and the lies, and you look at what's gone on at the FBI with the insurance policy and all of the things that happened. Turned out I did the right thing. But he signed, as you know, he also signed the FISA warrant. So Rod Rosenstein, who's in charge of this, signed a FISA warrant, and he also signed a letter that was essentially saying to fire James Comey. And he was right about that. He was absolutely right. So we'll see what happens. I think it's disgraceful, and so does a lot of other people. This is a pure and simple witch hunt. Thank you very much. Thank you, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, on Syria. It would be just very action. Or you're going to witness a change of...
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you all.
Say it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
We are getting clarity on that. Who was responsible for the weapons attack? We are getting some very good clarity, actually. We have some pretty good answers.
Thanks, everyone. What are your options? Thank you. Thank you.
We have a lot of options militarily, and we'll be letting you know pretty soon. Okay?
Thanks, everyone. Thank you all.
Probably after the fact.
Thank you.
Do you think Assad's lying?
Thanks, John. Thank
Do you think Assad's lying?
John, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
A truly extraordinary moment right there. Dare I say, an extraordinary moment in American history, sitting with his vice president, his national security advisor, and all of the military brass, ostensibly to discuss what to do in Syria. The president went after the special counsel, Robert Mueller, went after the investigation. He said the FBI broke into the offices. He used the words broke into the offices of Michael Cohen, his longtime fixer and attorney in New York. A disgraceful situation. He repeatedly said this was a witch hunt that was going on. He then went and said this is an attack on our country. He said he heard about it like all of you did, a real disgrace, repeated those words several times. He accused Robert Mueller and his team of being the most biased group of people. Almost all of them, he said, are Democrats. They found absolutely no collusion over the past year or so. He said, as a result, they're looking into all of this. He went after his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who he said made a very, very terrible mistake by recusing himself. He was asked at the end, are you going to fire Robert Mueller? He didn't give a decisive answer. Jeffrey Toobin, when I say this is a moment in American history we're watching, we can only anticipate what happens next.
We can anticipate, but we may not be right. I mean, it is a, to have the President of the United States attacking a prosecutor who was investigating his lawyer today, it's just something that's never happened before. I mean, so much of the Trump presidency, whether it's, claiming falsely that millions of people voted fraudulently, whether it's insisting that his political enemies, as he did today again, should be criminally investigated. This is without precedent in modern American history. But what we saw today is a president who, at least to my appearances, looks like he's itching to fire Robert Mueller. Now, whether someone will talk him out of it, I don't know. They've talked him out of it in the past, but, I mean, he seems very, very willing to do that. And keep in mind, not only was this Robert Mueller who sought this search warrant. It was Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, appointed very recently by Donald Trump, and it was magistrates and judges who said these search warrants were justified. So the idea that this is some witch hunt, that this is Robert Mueller going off on his own without any supervision and a vendetta and a witch hunt is simply not true when you look at all the people who were involved in the decision today. So, you know, the president can say what he says, but I think we have to have the obligation. We have the obligation here to tell the truth about what's really going on.
Ann Milgram, you're the former Attorney General of New Jersey, former federal prosecutor. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
I have not seen anything like this. And I would just add to what Jeff just said. If we look at the facts here, the facts are that Robert Mueller has been empowered to conduct an investigation. As part of that, he allegedly, we have reason to believe he found evidence of criminal activity that he believed should be referred to another law enforcement agency, to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And as Jeff just said, the decision of whether or not to have sought that search warrant was not made by Robert Mueller. And this is a really important point. That decision was made by the current U.S. Attorney who Donald Trump appointed, by the current FBI, the head of whom Donald Trump has appointed. And so to say that this is about Mueller could not be farther from the truth. Mueller is engaged in this larger investigation, but you get criminal referrals all the time. When I was Attorney General, we got referrals constantly. Sometimes we got them from citizens, sometimes from other law enforcement agencies. And then we had to decide, did we believe there was sufficient evidence to move forward, to seek search warrants? And so this is really about the people who are sitting in those chairs at the U.S. Attorney and at the FBI right now. So for Donald Trump to basically make this about Robert Mueller just doesn't square with the facts as we know them.
And if I can just add, it's not just the prosecutors. It's not just Mueller and Berman, the U.S. Attorney in New York. It's the judges who approved the search warrants.
True. Yeah.
They also were a check on the process. So the idea that this was just Robert Mueller is simply not true.
Everybody stand by. We have a lot to assess, but right now I want to bring in Congressman Will Hurd. He's a Republican member of the Intelligence and Homeland Security
Thank you so
Committee. He's
much.
a former clandestine officer for the CIA. What's your reaction to what we just heard from the President of the United States, Congressman?
Well, I think Bob Mueller should stay. He should be allowed to turn over every rock, pursue every lead. And this was obviously, you know, if you're investigating something and you find some potential criminal misconduct, you can refer that. But as all of the previous speakers and guests have highlighted, this was done by the U.S. Attorney in New York City, and a judge there is the one that agreed that there was probable cause for going into the lawyer's office and home. So it's been a pretty wild day in New York City. You have this going on, and then you have the UN Security Council debating the issues in Syria. So New York is the seat of a lot of activity today.
I can only imagine how uncomfortable those military brass must have felt at that event there, hearing the president say this is a disgraceful situation. The FBI broke into the offices of Michael Cohen, his attorney, and then he said, Congressman, this is an attack on our country and what we all stand for. Are you uncomfortable with those comments?
Well, I don't know what he was referring to, so you would have to ask the president.
He was referring to what happened in New York today when they had a search warrant and they went and collected all these documents.
Yeah, having a search warrant is definitely not breaking in somewhere. And the bottom line is, I'm sure my colleagues from the national security apparatus were uncomfortable because they're there trying to talk about what an appropriate response to the chemical weapons attack that happened in Syria, and having a response is important, and to get sidetracked from this is unfortunate.
Yeah, I would have thought the president would not have put the military brass in that awkward situation. If he wanted to make a statement, which of course is his right, he could have called the pool, had a separate event without putting the generals, the admirals in that kind of a situation, his national security team. But when he says it's a witch hunt, when he says it's a disgrace, a real disgrace, when he says these are the most conflicted group of people I have ever seen, referring to the special counsel Robert Mueller and his team, the most biased group of people saying they're almost all Democrats when the Attorney General is a Republican, the Deputy Attorney General is a Republican, Mueller is a Republican. Is the special counsel, in your opinion, Congressman, safe right now?
I think he is, because I think Bob Mueller is going to continue to do his work and to pursue any lead and turn over every single rock. I think many of us in Congress had made it clear that Bob Mueller should be able to continue his investigation when it comes to what happened with our elections in 2016. This is obviously a referral that was made to the U.S. Attorney in New York City. So I look at that as a separate issue from the work that Bob Mueller is doing on his investigation.
What would you do, Congressman, if he fired Robert Mueller or the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein?
Well, I think everybody recognizes that this situation would get even crazier, and if he were to actually fire one of those two individuals. I don't think Bob Mueller has done anything to warrant a firing, and I think many of us in Congress, on both sides of the aisle, believe that is the case, that he should be allowed to continue his work and pursue leads.
I want to get your thoughts on the breaking news involving Syria. The president was meeting with his military brass to discuss what the U.S. should do in the aftermath of this poison gas attack. Do you believe, Congressman, the president should seek authorization from Congress to use military force right now to respond?
I think a response and using military forces is something that is within his capabilities. We do have troops in the region, and this is something that should be coordinated with the rest of the international community. That's why the debates are happening right now at the UN Security Council. We should be working with the French. We should be working with the Israelis. We should also be putting pressure on the Russians, because the fact that the Russian ambassador to the UN is trying to act as if this was something that was staged, and that Russia had sent people in to investigate and didn't find any chemical weapons use. This is an example of information warfare and disinformation that the Russian government continues to put out, not only in Syria, but in places like Moldova and Georgia and Ukraine. And this kind of activity needs to stop. If anybody wants to see what actually happened, just look at the white helmets Twitter feed. This is a group of civilians that go into places in Syria to help rescue people when there's an attack. And it's obvious that young kids were being poisoned and were suffocating in their own fluids because of a chemical attack. And this is something that Russia should pay for this as well, because they're the ones that are helping to prop up Bashar al-Assad, and the Iranians are duplicitous in this as well too, because of their support to that regime. I think our response should make sure we severely degrade Bashar al-Assad's ability to conduct chemical warfare attack throughout the country of Syria.
We always appreciate your joining us, Congressman Will Hurd of Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will.
All right, let's get back to what we just heard from the President of the United States. The FBI raiding the offices of Michael Cohen, broke into their offices, the President says, a disgraceful situation, a witch hunt. Phil Mudd, he says, the President of the United States, this is an attack on our country, what we all stand for.
It is an attack on our country, and it is disgraceful, and that's on the part of the President of the United States. This is high school civics, what we call the balance of forces in this country, legislative, judicial. A judge decided outside the Mueller investigation that it was appropriate for federal investigators to go into this office. That's a judge separate from the Mueller investigation. If a mayor gets a speeding ticket from a police chief in a small town, he gets the same treatment that the carpenter does in the small town. You don't get to put your finger on the scales of justice, whether you're the mayor or the president. What the president just said, which is a disgrace, is that he believes he should be able to determine who's investigated in this country. That's what dictators do. That's not what democracies do. That's a disgrace.
How do you see it, Matthew?
Look, there's a lot here. I mean, that statement in the Oval Office, where Phil is right, he's going after the FBI, going after the entire apparatus of our law enforcement, saying, it's a witch hunt, they're coming to get me, they're breaking into my lawyer's office. I don't even know where you start with that. And we don't even know what this investigation is about. They seized tax documents, business records. There's, of course, the Stormy Daniels issue, and, of course, the larger Russia probe that Mueller's running. There's a whole range of issues here. We have no idea, but we do know the president is out there kind of almost threatening to fire people over this.
He says, the president, this is the most biased group of people, almost all Democrats, referring to Robert Mueller's team, which isn't true.
Yeah, Wolf, the president threw in everything but the kitchen sink. It was almost like watching the Saturday Night Live version of what we saw while we were seeing it live in the first place. He threw in the Democrats, blaming the FBI for not investigating the quote-unquote other side. He called his own attorney general a mistake. He threw in ISIS. He threw in the stock market. It was an attempt, as he does so often, to chum the waters and get off of the basic fact that Michael Cohen, someone who he described more than once in that press availability as his attorney, not his friend, as we were hearing for the last couple of weeks, as a threat to the United States, rather than, as Phil says, the duly prosecuted investigation of someone who's involved with the special prosecutor and with the New York Attorney General.
Attorney General is a Republican. The Deputy Attorney General is a Republican. The U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, a Republican. Robert Mueller, a Republican. Everybody stand by. We're getting new information. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Let's get some more on the breaking news. We're following the FBI raid targeting the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, our senior legal analyst. Former U.S. Attorney in New York, Preet Bharara, is joining us. But first, our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, is back with new reporting. What are you learning now, Gloria?
Well, we're learning that the search warrant was largely about Stormy Daniels. I was told that it has a number of requests, all of which are subsections of this big request, as it was described to me by a source with knowledge. That is the payments to Stormy Daniels, communications with the president about this, and communications with the campaign about this. The warrant also includes some kind of smaller investment issues that could be related or unrelated to the Stormy Daniels issues. My source was not sure, but interestingly enough, Wolf, it does mention election laws. And we know that Michael Cohen took out this private loan and paid it on behalf of the president. I also know from sources who are close to the president that they believe that they've crossed a line, and you heard that in the president today, that this is his personal attorney. They believe they have been playing nice and cooperating with the special counsel, and I think they now believe the special counsel has escalated this, so that's over.
Yeah, it's in a major moment right now. Preet, you heard the president. He reacted angrily to the raid on Michael Cohen and his offices, his home, saying this is a whole new level, the president said, of unfairness. He called it repeatedly a disgrace. He said it's an attack on our country in a true sense, his words. It's an attack, he said, on what we all stand for. What's your reaction when you hear the president blast all of these individuals along those lines?
Well, it's not different from what we've seen before. He doesn't like investigations that touch on him or his associates or his family or his dealings in any way, shape, or form. It's probably not a great idea for him to be, blasting folks this way because it continues to lay the foundation that he doesn't like investigations and he might do things to stop them. I think what's really important to note here, and maybe this has already been discussed because I'm coming at the tail end of the show, but sort of everyone involved, if the reporting is true, particularly the part about this being approved by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office, which I used to lead, are all people who are Republican and all people who have basically been handpicked by Donald Trump. I left office, my deputy took over, and then June Kim, and then he was removed specifically for Donald Trump to put in the United States Attorney who's now acting there, Jeff Berman. We handpicked him, and there were reports that he personally interviewed him. And for folks who don't appreciate this, to do a search on an attorney's files, residence, office, that's a very sensitive thing that requires the personal approval of the United States Attorney himself in consultation with Main Justice. Folks in the criminal division of Main Justice, the acting criminal division head is a gentleman by the name of John Cronin, who also used to work in my old office. So if it's true that the Southern District of New York has taken over this part of the investigation based on a referral from Bob Mueller's office, it's being done because people think it's very serious, people think it's totally warranted, and people think there's evidence that's of a significant enough nature that you're going to risk doing something sensitive like raiding a law office.
At the end of that Q&A, when the president was answering a few reporters' questions, he was asked about the special counsel, Robert Mueller. When one reporter said, why don't you just fire him, Mueller? And he said, well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens. You think he might fire him?
I thought all along he might fire him. But if this portion of the investigation has been, sort of lopped off, and now resides in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and I appreciate and continue to appreciate and respect the absolute independence of that office. That is not something you can shut down so easily, no matter who you remove from the top of that office. And they're on their third U.S. attorney in 14 months. You can put another one in. I think the career professionals there, if it's appropriate to do so, will pursue the evidence to wherever it's supposed to go.
We'll see where it goes next. Preet, thanks very much. That's it for me. Aaron Burnett out front starts right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight, we have breaking news. It's an extraordinary evening. Developments unfolding as I speak. The FBI raiding the office of President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. The agents armed with multiple search warrants, and we understand there were up to a dozen of those agents, seizing emails, tax documents, business records, and other communications between Trump and Cohen. And the president tonight livid, speaking out about the raid and Bob Mueller.
So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. I've been saying it for a long time. I've wanted to keep it down. We've given I believe over 1 million pages worth of documents to the special counsel, and it's a disgrace. It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for. So when I saw this and when I heard it like you did. I said, that is really now in a whole new level of unfairness. They found no collusion whatsoever with Russia. The reason they found it is there was no collusion at all. No collusion. This is the most biased group of people. These people have the biggest conflicts of interest I've ever seen.
Well, not sparing any words. And here's what we know about the raid. It stemmed partially from a referral from Mueller's office. This is according to Cohen's lawyer, Stephen Ryan. Now, Trump was asked, then got a question, whether he would fire the special counsel, given what you just heard him say about this being the most biased group of people. Here's what he said.
Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens. But I think it's really a sad situation when you look at what happened. And many people have said you should fire him. Again, they found nothing. And in finding nothing, that's a big statement. So we'll see what happens. I think it's disgraceful, and so does a lot of other people. This is a pure and simple witch hunt.
A White House official says Trump is watching news reports about the raid and that he did know about it before the story broke. It is impossible to overstate how significant this development is. Keep in mind, Michael Cohen and Donald Trump go way back. Anyone who has interacted with Trump knows about Cohen. They've been working together for about 12 years. Cohen has been referred to as Trump's pit bull. He's defended him on everything from business to personal matters. Cohen has also come under scrutiny in the Russia investigation. He's been called in front of Congress to testify for his role in trying to build a Trump Tower in Moscow and questioned about communication with the Kremlin. Keep in mind, and this could be very central to what happened today, he also paid $130,000 in hush money to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star who said she had an affair with Trump. Let's get to Pamela Brown with this breaking development at the White House. Pamela, the president livid tonight. Not mincing words, not with a few-word response, going on there for over a minute.
Right, Aaron. He is visibly angered by this. And just to set the scene here, he was at the table surrounded by his top military brass. They were there to meet about Syria in the wake of the apparent chemical weapons attack there. But unprompted, without even being asked a question by reporters, the president laid in to the FBI, to his own attorney general, and to Robert Mueller, calling the entire probe a witch hunt, saying it is a disgraceful situation, even going as far as to say this is an attack on our country. And he even left the door open, Aaron, to firing Robert Mueller. He said, many people have said I should fire Robert Mueller. We'll see what happens. He left that open more than we have seen before. He's, of course, called the probe a witch hunt. But in this case, he's saying, look, that we'll see what happens. For context, though, Aaron, Robert Mueller referred this to authorities in New York. What happened here was he found this information, whatever it was, in the course of his investigation, went to the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein would have made the decision that the jurisdiction was in New York. So this isn't even something that Robert Mueller was controlling. So it's pretty extraordinary to see the president go after him and the FBI in this fashion. And this is, as we know, related to Stormy Daniels. What's surrounding that, according to my colleague Gloria Borger, that was sort of the premise of the search warrant, a search warrant that would have had to be signed off by a judge, Aaron. Right. The authorities would have had to go to the judge, show probable cause that a crime had been committed and that the evidence was here at the scene. But the president kept saying that the FBI broke into the offices of his attorney, which is just simply not accurate, Aaron.
Right. Thank you very much, Pamela. As Pamela points out, not accurate because they had multiple search warrants to do so, signed off by a judge. That is not a break-in. That is lawful. That is how it works. Evan Perez is out front in Washington. And Evan, I know you have a lot more details about the FBI raids, I suppose, as the word may be, in multiple locations.
Right, Aaron. We know of at least a couple of locations. The law office that Michael Cohen has at 30 Rockefeller Center, and as well as a hotel there in Midtown Manhattan where he's been living. We also are told, according to the Wall Street Journal, that there was another search that was conducted at Michael Cohen's home. So at least according to Stephen Ryan, his attorney, there were multiple search warrants that were issued that were conducted today as part of this investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. And according to sources who've talked to Gloria Borger, a lot of this had to do with Stormy Daniels. This had to do with payments that were made to Stormy Daniels, $130,000 that was done right before the election. They also were looking for communication specifically between Michael Cohen and the president, Michael Cohen and people involved in the campaign. All of this relating to election laws. And that's important because this $130,000 payment was not just a fix by Michael Cohen, a longtime personal lawyer of the president. This was potentially a violation of federal election laws because it constituted some payment for the benefit of the president. So there's been a lot of multiple explanations by Michael Cohen as to exactly why this money was paid, whether the president was aware of this or not. Again, a lot of open questions. We know, Aaron, that when this payment was made, the bank actually flagged it as a potential suspicious transaction. So a lot of reasons why this was done. And let me just add one last thing. Mm-hmm. To Pamela's point, this is a raid that was actually authorized by the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, Jeffrey Berman, who is President Trump's own pick for that office. He hasn't actually been officially nominated to fill that job, replacing Preet Bharara, as you know. So we'll see whether or not that nomination actually goes ahead, having signed off on a raid of the president's personal attorney.
Pretty significant question that you raise, and of course, significant point that you make, right? This is the president's own man, his appointee, going ahead and saying this should happen. Someone who I believe Michael Zeldin will give us more details, but also worked with Rudy Giuliani, an ally of the president. Thank you very much, Evan. And I want to go now to Paul Callan, former prosecutor Chris Swecker, former assistant FBI director for the Criminal Investigative Division, and Michael Zeldin, Robert Mueller's former special assistant at the Department of Justice. Paul, since you're with me, let me start with you. We understand here multiple warrants. You heard Evan going through at least 3 different locations. And the warrants were about, quote, seizing the privileged communications between Cohen and his clients. How significant is this for the president?
It's very significant. It's extraordinarily aggressive for the Justice Department and the FBI to engage in such activity. And the reason I say that is normally when you have an attorney's office, you don't hear of attorneys' offices getting raided because there's the attorney-client privilege that protects the documents in the office. And these documents may be documents relating to the President of the United States, who is Cohen's primary client. There is, however, an exception to the attorney-client privilege rule, and it's called the crime-fraud exception. If an attorney engages in criminal or fraudulent conduct with his client, then their communications are not privileged and can be seized. So I'm just wondering what the federal judge was looking at when he authorized a raid on an attorney's office. It sounds to me like crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege.
Michael, what do you say? Crime fraud exception? Because, you know, the reality of this is a judge did sign off, and to do so, as Pam and Evan were laying out, they would have had to believe there was probable evidence that a crime had been committed.
Well, that's right. But Michael Cohen is a complicated figure in relationship to the analysis of attorney-client privilege. And that is to say, if Cohen was operating as an in-house counsel for the Trump organization, and it's hard to figure out what exactly he was. Sometimes he's called personal attorney, sometimes he's on the Trump letterhead. If he's an in-house counsel and he's providing business advice, that's not privileged. If he's providing legal advice, which is intended to be privileged, then that's privileged. So it might be that he's not actually being, you know, the evidence being taken from him is not exactly client-attorney privilege communications. Plus, a lot of this evidence will be segregated. It'll be analyzed by what we call a clean team, people who are not associated with any part of Mueller's investigation. They may create a privilege log and look at documents that can be reviewed by the court to determine whether they are, in fact, attorney-client privilege protected, in which case they wouldn't be used against Cohen. So there's a lot to be sorted through at this early stage of the investigation.
It is pretty incredible, though, Chris, you know, that what we're talking about here is a personal attorney, whatever technical role he might have been. I've known Michael Cohen for a long time. You know, the relationship was such that the president, at that time, the businessman, would call him in his office and ask for something to be done, and Michael would present a bullet point sheet of paper because they never used email. And then Trump would either do it or not do it. I mean, this was very much a personal one-on-one relationship. And Cohen knows a lot. And we now know there were at least a dozen FBI agents involved. Chris, what does that say to you? A dozen agents and at least, we know, 3 locations searched.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary event. In my 25 years as a special agent, 2 as head of the criminal division of the FBI, I've only seen a handful of these types of warrants. If you read the U.S. Attorney's Manual, I consulted it very briefly before we came on. There are extraordinary authorities that you have to get a search warrant for an attorney's office. There's privileged material in there, as was pointed out by Michael Zeldin. There'll be a taint team probably that will take custody of the evidence and make sure and go through the evidence, make sure that there isn't legitimately privileged information in there. So this is highly extraordinary. There had to be a strong showing of probable cause that there was evidence there, evidence of a crime, and as was pointed out, possibly even evidence that the attorney was participating in the crime for the agents to go in there and do that.
And Paul, also, you know, the significance of all of this. You're talking about, you know, the president trying to say, witch hunt, and plenty of people agree with me, and it's a disgrace, and they're all the most biased group of people. And there's a certain number of people, I'm sure, who will just believe it when he says that. But let's just remind everyone, the Deputy Attorney General is the one who made the decision to refer to the Southern District of New York. The person there in charge is the president, President Trump's appointee. That's the guy who signed off on doing this.
That's right, just appointed.
Trump's own guy, not Preet the guy he fired.
Right, and Giuliani's former law partner, so someone with strong ties to the Republican Party.
I mean, which is extremely significant when you think of it that way. And, Chris, let me ask you, when you say you haven't seen anything like this, a couple times in your entire career, the last time in this investigation we've heard of anybody being raided by the FBI is Paul Manafort. And obviously right now things are looking horrific for Paul Manafort. Is that an appropriate parallel to draw?
Yeah, I think it is. Most of the time these things are handled in a very sort of genteel fashion. When you're dealing with attorneys, you ask for the evidence, turn it over, or you might use a grand jury subpoena. In this case, to go directly at it, multiple locations, unannounced, I had heard something about a no-knock. That's even more extraordinary if that were the case. And note also that this is not the special counsel
when you
doing
say a
this
no-knock, that's a
investigation
just
per
barge
se.
in, right? Because they're worried someone could flee or hide
That's
something.
correct.
Okay, sorry, just to clarify. Go ahead.
That's correct. Correct. And I'll just point out that this is not the special counsel's investigation. Apparently, he's punted it over to the Southern District of New York via the Attorney General's office. So this is a separate investigation. And you can see the president's anger was directed towards the special counsel. All he did was pass the information on that he came across during the course of his investigation, obviously. So there's a separate investigation up in New York in the Southern District.
All right.
That's right.
Thank you all very much. And more on the breaking news, the long history between Cohen and the president. Just who is Michael Cohen, the man called Trump's pit bull? Plus more breaking news, Trump just meeting with the senior military advisors, saying the United States will retaliate for the chemical weapons attack in Syria, and a damning new budget projection. Trump, truly the king of debt. His top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, my guest. Breaking news, President Trump livid tonight, ripping into the FBI, criticizing the agency's raid on the office and hotel room and home of his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, calling it a witch hunt and disgraceful.
I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. I've been saying it for a long time. It's a disgrace. It's frankly a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for. So when I saw this and when I heard it like you did. I said, that is really now in a whole new level of unfairness.
Of course, we should keep in mind that the attorney who requested this is President Trump's own appointee, just to make that very loud and clear, replacing Preet Bharara, the man he fired. Now, agents were seizing information related to Stormy Daniels, as well as private communications between Cohen and his clients. Of course, the biggest, the most prominent of which is the President of the United States, according to a source. Now, Cohen has stood by the president for 12 years. And during that time, he became known as Mr. Fix-It. Any sort of a problem, he was right there. Jason Carroll is out front. And Jason, you know, having seen these two together over many years, to say they are tight would be an understatement of the relationship that they had.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much more to this man than simply making that $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. I mean, he's as close as one might be able to get to Donald Trump and the Trump family without being family. One friend described him this way. He said, he is the man, if you ever are in trouble at 3 a.m. in the morning and you need someone to help, this is the man to do it. He gained a reputation throughout working within the Trump universe as being the pit bull, the man who could get things done. And he's been getting things done with the Trump business empire since 2006. Prior to being Trump's personal attorney, he was executive vice president of the Trump organization, and for a certain period of time also worked in Trump Entertainment. The bottom line, Aaron, he knows the business side of the world. He also now knows the political side of the world as well. Aaron.
And Jason, you're standing outside, I believe, of the hotel, one of the locations that was searched where he was believed to have been staying as this happened. Michael Cohen, that is?
That is correct. Apparently at his home, he was having some sort of plumbing issues, so he was staying here at the Lowe's Regency. This early this morning is the place where the FBI agents came in. Apparently there's about a dozen agents. They were here for several hours. Unclear what material they took from this location, but this is the place where Michael Cohen has been staying, at least for now. Aaron.
All right, Jason, thank you very much. And out front now, Joan Walsh, national affairs correspondent for The Nation, former Republican Senator Rick Santorum, and April Ryan, White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. Senator, let me just start with you. You know, I don't know if you heard the prior conversation, but, you know, head of the FBI Criminal Investigative Unit for 25 years, Chris Swecker, said he's only seen this a couple of times in his entire career, something of this significance. What's your takeaway about how important of a night this is?
Well, I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, obviously the target of all this is the president's lawyer. We assume that it has to do with the president. Obviously, it probably does. The question is, you know, what did the president know, and was he involved in this? If, you know, if this man is, as he is portrayed, as someone who sort of fixes things, the president may not know anything about this. I mean, it would be probably normal for the president not know of these sort of things that are problems in his life, that things that he would like to have go away. You have people take care of them and actually don't bring them to your attention for a lot of different reasons. So this may be a situation where he fixed it, and he fixed it in a way that ran afoul, potentially afoul of campaign finance laws, and there could be problems as a result of that.
Joan?
Senator, what did he fix that the president didn't know about? I don't have anybody going around fixing things for me that I don't know about.
I mean, the way I know you're trying
you're
to
not
defend
Donald
him,
Trump.
but the way you're defending him actually raises more questions than it answers. I mean, we have a situation right now. First of all, I was stunned and kind of saddened for the military people in that room when the president came out and used what should have been a statement about our national defense to defend himself, to defend his lawyer, to attack Robert Mueller and all of these law enforcement people. I don't know how those men, I think they were all men, sat there and had to take that at a time when we're really supposed to be thinking about how do we respond to Syria. It was such a typical Donald Trump self-serving, self-pity party move. And I just look at this and I think this is a big night, and I will agree with the senator on one thing. We don't really know what they have, but I would say they have a lot.
We don't know what they have. The one thing we do know is that a judge would have found probable cause to think that a crime had been committed, whatever that crime may have been, that would be what had allowed them to authorize these raids. April, about this moment, though, surrounded by his national security team, we're talking about a crucial moment for this country and the world in Syria. And he's making a decision about whether to strike Syria imminently. And yet he decides to go off for well over a minute, impugning the FBI, Bob Mueller, and everyone else of bias, including, I guess, his own appointee. Jeff Zeleny is reporting that no one in that room had any warning, that nobody expected him to do this. This was completely off script. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, but you know, you don't even need reporting to know this. This president goes by knee-jerk reaction whenever it's something that attacks him or makes him look like he's in a bad light. And when he went off because, number one, the man that's closest to him that he talked about, he did not know that he did this payment. One, common sense is when you're dealing with this kind of investigation that's looking for the trail of money, you don't do a lot of talking. I've talked to former prosecutor Chris Darden in the O.J. Simpson trial. He said, look, the president talked too much, they talk too much, and you know, you don't taunt the very people that are upholding your freedoms. So, and then Chris Darden also said a couple of weeks ago, and this is very poignant for this moment, and it reminds you of the impeachment of Bill Clinton. They were looking at Whitewater, and it wound up being an impeachment over a lie about Monica Lewinsky. Now,
a lie about sex, which of course is the possible parallel to this.
Exactly. But here's the thing with this Russia investigation, and this is what Chris Darden said to me. He said, look, it's like a police officer's going in to raid a home for drugs. You go to get the drugs, but you see the wife being beaten. You don't leave the wife there. You bring it all in. So this is what's happening. They're following the trail of money, and now Michael Cohen's properties have been raided, and they're seizing information. They've taunted the FBI, and they've talked too much, and it's happening now.
So, Senator, what happens here? I mean, is the president going to go ahead and fire Mueller? I mean, let me just play again. He was asked about that today. After he went off on the tirade about the FBI and everybody else involved in this. So he was asked, and let me just play it again for you.
Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens. But I think it's really a sad situation when you look at what happened. And many people have said you should fire him. Again, they found nothing. And in finding nothing, that's a big statement. If you know the person who's in charge of the investigation, you know all about that, Deputy Rosenstein, Rod Rosenstein. He wrote the letter very critical of Comey. One of the things I said, I fired Comey. Well, I turned out to do the right thing.
What do you make of this, Senator? Of course, Rosenstein, who he's holding up there as someone who did the right thing, is the guy who referred to this to the Southern District of New York, where then Trump's appointee went ahead and went for this search warrant. What do you make of his response to the question?
Look, I think the president is frustrated that the attacks keep coming and that everything he's trying to do and running the country, like dealing with the issue of Syria, keeps getting sidetracked with more and more investigations. I understand that. Frankly, I sympathize with the president's frustration with Jeff Sessions recusing himself. I don't think there should have been a special counsel. I've said that on this network for over a year now, because they can be endless, as we saw with Ken Starr and a lot of others. This will go on and on and on.
16 people charged. I mean,
yeah, but
certainly
none
they
of them
found
related to
something.
what
Hard
the
to say it wasn't
investigation
worth
was
doing.
about. Well, with all due respect, there are none of them with respect to what the investigation was about, whether there was any collusion with the
Russians, I believe.
Issues with elections violations, and money to hush someone before an election?
I'm talking about collusion with the Trump campaign. That's what this investigation was supposed to be about. And so far, we have no evidence of any collusion and certainly no charges with respect to any collusion.
What happened with Bill Clinton? It started off with Whitewater.
I agree with you.
It started off with Whitewater with Bill Clinton, and then it went into Monica Lewinsky. So you cannot say one over the other.
That's why I don't like special counsels.
I think listening to the president say they've found nothing, trash people, say he did the right thing in firing Jim Comey, just brings home how serious this is and how he's defending the indefensible at this point and trashing law enforcement people who all, by the way, happen to be Republicans. This is not a partisan witch hunt.
Right. Well, of course, we don't know the individual politics of those involved today. But it shouldn't matter if you're an FBI agent on a raid.
They're registered Republicans. They've given money to Republicans. That's all we know.
Thank you all very much. And more on our breaking news. The president calling the Michael Cohen raid a witch hunt, slamming the special counsel. A top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee is out front to respond. And Trump moments ago promising the chemical attack in Syria will be met forcefully. That's a crucial thing. What does it mean? My guest, Senator Joni Ernst. Breaking news, President Trump furious over the FBI raid on his longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Trump focusing his anger on Robert Mueller and his team, and also on his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions.
The Attorney General made a terrible mistake when he did this and when he recused himself, and we would have put a different Attorney General in. So he made what I consider to be a very terrible mistake for the country. But you'll figure that out. If you know the person who's in charge of the investigation, you know all about that, Deputy Rosenstein, Rod Rosenstein. He wrote the letter very critical of Comey, and he was right about that. He was absolutely right.
Out front now, Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu, who's on the Judiciary Committee, obviously front and center when it comes to Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein. Congressman, the president went on to call the FBI raid a disgraceful situation. He called it a witch hunt. He said the group of people involved are the most biased group. He refused to rule out firing Bob Mueller. Your reaction?
Thank you, Aaron, for your question. The president's comments are un-American and disgraceful. Fundamental to American democracy is a rule of law. And what the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York did today was a vindication of the principle that no one is above the law, not the president, not his attorney, no one.
So the big question tonight is, of course, what this raid was about. Here's what we know. About a dozen agents were involved. At least 3 locations were involved. A lot of documents were taken, from bank documents to communications between Trump and Michael Cohen. And a lot of this related to Cohen's payment to Stormy Daniels. So the question I have for you, Congressman, is, do you think Mueller's investigation has expanded too far? That this is proof that it expanded beyond its limits? And that's why this had to be referred to the Southern District of New York, and Mueller himself couldn't do it.
This is a great example of Robert Mueller knowing his limits. He realized that whatever this is about Michael Cohen, it was not within his jurisdiction. So he sent it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. It was their decision to request the search warrants, and then an independent federal judge had authorized the search warrants. And by the way, last month, Congresswoman Kathleen Rice and I wrote a letter to the FBI asking them to investigate Michael Cohen because that $130,000 payment looked like a massive violation of campaign finance laws.
Is that what you think this is all about? Yeah. Campaign finance laws? That's going to be the extent of it?
It's certainly possible. The public reporting shows there may have been bank fraud dating back several years. We don't know, but we do know that the judge thought that Michael Cohen either was not going to cooperate or would have destroyed evidence in authorizing these search warrants, because one of the first requirements is that the U.S. Attorney's Office has to show they could have gotten this information another way.
Right. And of course, the Cohen has said he's been cooperating there. Obviously, they felt they didn't have that. They didn't have the cooperation at all. You heard what the president said there, Congressman. The Attorney General made a terrible mistake when he recused himself. We would have put a different Attorney General in. He made a very terrible mistake for the country. Trump obviously livid at his Attorney General and talking about bias, witch hunt, disgrace, referring to Bob Mueller's team. Is Bob Mueller's job at risk right now or not?
It's possible. I really don't understand why Donald Trump is acting the way he is, because Robert Mueller is the only person that can clear his name. And if Donald Trump, in fact, did nothing wrong, he would want the investigation to proceed forward and to conclude and then to see if his name gets cleared. But the actions and statements by Donald Trump show evidence of guilt. It shows consciousness of guilt, because an innocent person would not be acting the way our president is.
The president finally, just last week, broke his silence on the Stormy Daniels issue, which, again, I just want to point out, we know was at the core of what was they were seeking today, among other things. But Stormy Daniels was at the core. And he was asked specifically, did he know about that payment? Here's how he answered the question on Air Force One.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no truth or allegation?
You have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
Obviously said that to reporters. He didn't say it under oath. Do you think he told the truth?
The Washington Post has documented that Donald Trump has lied over 2,000 times since he got inaugurated. So I don't have any idea whether Donald Trump told the truth or not. But I do know that this Stormy Daniels $130,000 payment looked like a pretty clear violation of campaign finance laws, where the maximum contribution or payment would have been $5,400.
All right. Thank you very much, Congressman Liu. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Aaron.
And next, President Trump calling the raid on his lawyer's office an attack on America. I'm going to get reaction from Republican Senator Joni Ernst. And the United States on a potential collision course with economic catastrophe, owing more money than we make. Are Trump's tax cuts and tariffs to blame? Breaking news, President Trump angry tonight over the raid on his personal attorney's office. A source close to the president telling CNN this seems to have struck a nerve unlike anything we have seen so far. Tonight, the president declaring the raid a, quote, witch hunt.
I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for.
Out front tonight, Republican Senator Joni Ernst. And Senator Ernst, thanks so much for your time tonight. Just to be clear, of course, it wasn't a break-in, right? The FBI had multiple search warrants for these locations, and they had obtained these from a judge which felt there was probable cause, for a possible crime. The president called the raid on Michael Cohen's office, in his words, a, quote, attack on our country. Do you agree with that, Senator?
Well, I can't speak for the president, but what I would want to know is what is the tie-in with the investigation? What are we talking about? Is it Russia? Is it elections collusion? That's what I would want to know. And so I want to know what the tie-in is with this addition to the investigation. I really want to know, was there collusion with the elections process? That's what we need to correct before we see any more involvement of Russia in our election cycle. That's at the heart of the matter.
It is at the heart of the matter. I just want to make sure I understand, though, if Bob Mueller uncovered something related to Stormy Daniels or bank fraud or something else, we do understand that some of these seizures were related to Stormy Daniels, and therefore referred it to another jurisdiction because he felt it was outside his purview. Would you be okay with them pursuing it if indeed it was a crime and it was committed with perhaps the president's knowledge?
If he had found actual evidence that there was something wrong, certainly that's fine. But going back to Robert Mueller, we really want to get at the heart of Russia and their investigation there with our elections process. So anything other than that is kind of an aside, and let that go where it may. But certainly from my perspective in Congress, I want to know about Russia and our election cycle.
And the president, of course, Senator, was asked whether he would fire Bob Mueller over this. He sidestepped the question, said, would I fire Bob Mueller? Didn't dismiss it. Didn't answer in the affirmative, though. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has put out a statement warning the president not to do it, and it's saying, in part, quote, the president is thinking of using this raid to fire Special Counsel Mueller or otherwise interfere with the chain of command in the Russia probe. We Democrats have one simple message for him: don't. Obviously, Senator, you speak as a Republican tonight. Do you agree with Senator Schumer? Should Mueller be off the table, or would you be okay if the president fired Bob Mueller now?
Well, the president has the ability to do that, but I don't see him doing that. I think we have come too far in the Russia investigation. And again, I think that needs to be investigated fully. And once Robert Mueller has come to the conclusion whether there was collusion, wasn't collusion, how Russia was involved in the election cycle, then that needs to be wrapped up and presented to Congress.
Senator, I want to turn to the other breaking story tonight. The president obviously saying all of this in the midst of a meeting with his national security team on a crucial decision for this country, which is whether to strike Syria with missiles and whether such a strike is imminent. Here is what he said about that.
It will be met, and it will be met forcefully. We're going to make a decision tonight or very shortly thereafter, and you'll be hearing the decision. But we can't let atrocities like we all witnessed, and you can see that, and it's horrible. We can't let that happen. In our world, we can't let that happen.
Senator, the president said that he's going to be making a decision tonight or very shortly thereafter. Do you have any sense of how imminent this is? Could a decision and a strike come tonight?
I think a decision could come very soon, and I know that the president will take the advice of his military commanders very seriously. The images that we see coming out of Syria are heartbreaking. Innocent men, women, and children have been killed, and thousands of others injured in this chemical attack. We need to take that seriously here in the United States, and I do believe that the president will act soon.
You know, and you talk about those images. They are hard to watch, but it's important for people to see them, to understand what we are talking about, to understand that these are human lives, these are children, these are people who have undergone horrific suffering in what appears to be a chemical attack. We know at least 49 people are dead, many more injured, perhaps the gas being so heavy that it sunk down into the basement where children and families were seeking refuge. Senator, you know, you've served in the armed forces, you've spent a long career doing so, you've spent time in the region. Do you support another strike?
I do, and I supported the president's strike last year about this same time as well. It is important that when these atrocities are committed that we act swiftly, and I believe the president will do that. As a veteran, as the chairwoman of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee, it is important to understand what is going on in Syria, and then also what are the connections with Iran and Russia. Those are also some of my concerns. They continue to prop up the Bashar al-Assad regime, and we can't have them involved in this region, especially when we see that they are not following through with getting rid of chemical weapons in Syria. We can't continue to see these types of deaths occur in an innocent civilian population.
Senator Ernst, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you.
And next, Trump has called with great pride himself the king of debt. Is that how he's now running the United States of America? My guest with the answer, Trump's top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow. Tonight, President Trump proving he is the self-proclaimed king of debt. Trump's tax cuts and spending bill, in part driving the debt level to its highest level since World War II. Now, this is according to the Congressional Budget Office, which tonight predicts that America's debt is surging to reach about 105% of GDP by 2028. In English, that means we will owe more money than we take in as a country, than we create as a country. And it's shocking this is due to Trump's policies, given what he said about Obama.
You know, our national debt has doubled since Obama became president. And a bad factor, we haven't done anything.
During his regime, during President Obama's regime, we've doubled our national debt. We owe $20 trillion right now, doubled under Obama, and we haven't done anything.
Out front now, Larry Kudlow, the White House chief economic advisor. Larry, great to talk to you. So, look, the forecast here, more debt than economic output for the United States of America. In anyone's personal life, that would be a disaster.
Well, I don't know. A lot of people have debt. But let's take your thing. The CBO, God bless them, they're very lowball economic growth estimates. Last I looked, and I have not studied this report, but last I looked, they were slightly below 2% growth for the next 10 years. We don't believe that. Our view, as you know, is lower tax rates, particularly business, create incentives to invest and work. I think we're going to pick up productivity and wages. So that gives you an entirely different baseline. Now, I'm not saying the government is sufficiently limited. I don't think it is. I'd like to see a much more modest role for government. That's always been my view. But, you know, I would take a somewhat larger deficit in order to finance long-term growth in the economy, which is how I look at this.
So, you know what's interesting, Larry? In 2009, when the CBO said that the debt would reach 68% of GDP by 2019, and of course now it's saying 105%, so we're way out of that range. But in 2009, the prediction was 68%. And of course, you weighed in on it, and here's what you said.
The families of America, take a look at this budget and these humongous deficits and the doubling of the debt and so forth and the out-of-control spending. Okay, you can't really deny it. Bob Rice defends that on economic terms, but it is a fact. People see this is like a pinball machine on permanent tilt, Steve Moore. This is like a completely out of a line. This is the most unbalanced fiscal story coming out of Washington, really, in our history.
What's changed, Larry?
Well, I'll tell you what's changed.
Other than Rice and Moore switching sides.
No, Bob Rice is a great friend of mine, so is Steve Moore. So, look, the trouble I had with the Obama program was it was all spending. It was all spending, and most of it was not spending for infrastructure. Most of it was spending for welfare programs and social spending. That's not a growth prescription.
Trump just signed a big spending bill.
Pardon?
Trump just signed a big spending bill. He said he didn't like it and wouldn't do it again, but he signed it.
Yeah, well, nothing like the Obama stimulus package, which was, what, $1 trillion at the beginning. So I'm just saying, look, I'm not happy with the government as it is now. I think spending's got to come down. As I said, we need more limited government, much more modest government. I agree with all that. But I think, again, with respect to the Obama years, if he had a growth program, A, we would all be more prosperous today, and B, I wouldn't have fretted about the deficit. I mean, he had a chance to lower taxes. It was under discussion, but he never did.
So in the context of your concern, though, that you've had in the past about humongous deficits, to use your words, out of control spending, my question is whether you have real faith in the man you work for and his belief on this issue, because here is what he has said in the past, Larry.
I'm the king of debt. I'm great with debt. Nobody knows debt better than me. I've made a fortune by using debt.
Are you really on the same page with him, Larry, when it comes to this?
Yes, of course. That's private sector stuff. I'm not going to go there. Look, it's spending that troubles me, and I will just say this, Aaron. We are looking at very significant, what I will call enhanced rescission actions, which will lower spending by a significant amount. I can't give you details yet. It's under consideration.
So this is something not yet to be rolled out, but you're saying that would curb the spending?
Well, it would help. I don't know that it'll curb. It's not the end all, but yes, it will help. And will help to, you know, that lousy spending deal. The president doesn't like the deal. As he said, he wished he hadn't signed it, but he did.
But the reason that there's been a problem here, obviously, since the tax cuts, right, you got to jump, and then there's been a challenge. And we all know part of the reason for that is tariffs and a mixed message on tariffs and whether they're going to be imposed and whether they're not. The threats between the U.S. and China have a lot of farmers they're really concerned, right? I've spoken to a few of them. Here are two.
Well, I grow more than 100,000 bushels a year, so a 50-cent reaction is $50,000. So that's a big deal.
How much will these tariffs cost you, Tim?
Well, the U.S. sells $1 billion worth of products to China. That equates to about $7 per head marketed in the United States. So our farm markets 5,000 head a year. That'll equate to about $35,000 for our farm.
So, Larry, I don't know if you could hear him clearly, but he said $35,000 for his farm. That was a hog farmer. The soybean farmer said $50,000 a year for his farm. Look, this could be devastating for a whole lot of people. What do you say to them?
You know, look, with all respect to that gentleman, I don't know how he arrives at that position. And I don't know what kind of economic growth projections he's got for the farm area. That's going to matter a lot. Our Secretary of the Agriculture has said farmers are patriots if it came down to that. But let me just go back for a second.
But when he says that, what does he mean? Is Sonny Perdue saying a great patriot, so you're just going to eat it?
There are no tariffs. Let me say this. There are no tariffs at the present time. There are proposals, there are discussions, but there are no tariffs at the present time. We'll see in a couple of months whether our tariff issues work out or not. We'll see if China responds. So far, they've responded unsatisfactorily. But I hate to predict the future, and I hate to see you and others make the case that the worst is going to happen. We don't know any of that just yet on the economy or how the disposition of this conversation will be.
Larry, before we go, part of the reason I asked you this, though, is you've always been such an honest person and a person of integrity. And on the night when the market went up and then the president threatened $100 billion in additional tariffs on China, you were asked about it the next morning. When did you find out? You took a long pause. Let me just play it so people can see it.
When did the president first tell you that he was going to announce these additional potential $100 billion in tariffs?
Last evening.
You took that pause and you answered the truth, Larry, because that's the kind of person that you are. But my question to you is, do you have confidence? Do you have confidence that the president doesn't really want these tariffs, that he's going to listen to you, that he's going to do the right thing?
Well, I'm not necessarily. Let me just back up again.
Okay.
Look, China has had unfair and illegal trading practices for 2 decades or longer, and particularly in the technology area, as you know. Forced technology give-ups, unlawful transfers of intellectual power. We can't let that. You can't steal our intellectual authority. So something has to be done, okay? So when you say tariffs, I don't know if it'll be tariffs, but the president is correct. He's got a backbone. Prior administrations would not do anything with China, and Trump is out there saying, wait a minute, we are going to unveil this and unmask this. If you negotiate with us, we may not need the tariffs, but Trump may use tariffs. I want to make that very clear. And I think he's in the right. China's broken all the laws of the trading and the WTO. You know that too, Aaron. Somebody at some place has got to say, we are the most innovative entrepreneurial country, the U.S., but you can't just steal our technology. You can't just steal that. So we have to do something about it. So I will tell you honestly, yes, I heard the announcement. It was late that evening. Okay, fine. It doesn't matter to me. In terms of the overall program, I think Trump's on absolutely the right track here. And at the end of this, I call it the end of the rainbow, there could be a lot more economic growth with more real free trading conditions, which we don't have. More growth, not just for the U.S., but for the whole world, including for China.
All right. Well, Larry Kudlow, thank you very much. I appreciate